A court that started out as the branch nobody worried about now decides how you vote, whether you can carry a gun, what your doctor can do, and it does it without a single one of those 9 people ever having to face an election. That's where the story lands, and I want to know how we got there.
Which is the interesting part, because if you told the men who wrote the American Constitution that the courts would end up like this, I think several of them would have laughed at you. Oliver Reed. I spent most of my working life chasing down whether a thing people say is true actually happened, and the story of this court is full of things everyone says that turn out to be a bit sideways.
Marcus Bell. And can I just say, the first time I actually stood in that courtroom, what struck me was how small it is. You picture a cathedral. It's a room. Marble, yes, but a room. 9 chairs. And out of that little room comes a ruling that reaches into a pharmacy in Texas and a classroom in Ohio. That gap, tiny room, enormous reach. That's the whole thing to me.
That's a lovely way in, actually. So let's do it properly. How did the quiet branch get loud?
Start with what they were handed. Article 3 of the Constitution, the bit that creates the judiciary, is short, almost embarrassingly short next to the other 2. Congress gets pages. The presidency gets pages. The courts get a paragraph and a shrug.
It's the youngest sibling clause of the Constitution.
It rather is. And one of the framers, this is Hamilton in the Federalist Essays, described the judiciary as the least dangerous branch. His reasoning being, Congress controls the money, the president controls the sword, and the courts control neither. They have no army, they can't tax you, all they have is judgment.
Which sounds like weakness.
It sounds like weakness. And for a while it behaved like weakness.
The first Chief Justice quit. Did you know that? John Jay, first man in the job, left it to go be governor of New York, because being governor of New York seemed like the bigger deal. Nobody quits the modern court to go run a state. Nobody.
That's the detail that tells you everything, isn't it? The job was a step down.
It was a step down. They rode circuit. The justices literally travelled around the country on horseback, hearing ordinary cases, because the top job didn't fill the calendar. It was a bad job with a long commute.
And you can date fairly precisely when that changes. 1803, a case called Marbury against Madison.
OK, this is the one everyone half remembers from school and nobody can explain. Marcus, you're the concrete one. What actually happened?
Right, so political mess, basically. Outgoing administration tries to pack a bunch of last-minute appointments before the new lot take over. One of those appointments, a chap called Marbury, doesn't get his paperwork delivered in time. New administration comes in, says, tough, we're not delivering it. Marbury sues to get his job.
Small stakes.
Tiny. It's a paperwork dispute. It's a man wanting his commission. But the Chief Justice, John Marshall, sees the trap. If he orders the government to hand it over, they'll just ignore him, and the whole court looks toothless. If he says no, he looks like he's caving to political pressure. Either way, he loses.
So he does something rather clever, and this is the move that matters. And so we can't enforce it. In fact, we won't.
So he loses the case to win the war.
He hands his opponents the small victory and quietly claims an enormous power in the same breath. The power to say what the Constitution means and to strike down a law that violates it. Judicial review.
He gives up a battle he was going to lose anyway and walks off with the crown jewels. And nobody notices for years, because on the day it just looked like Marbury didn't get his job.
See, that's the part I love. The biggest power grab in the court's history looked, on the day, like a nothing. But here's what I want to nail down, because this is the common misconception. People assume the Constitution says the Supreme Court can strike down laws. It doesn't, does it?
It does not. Not in those words. Judicial review is not written down, it's inferred. Marshall's argument is essentially logical. The Constitution is the highest law. Judges swear to uphold it. Therefore, when an ordinary law clashes with the Constitution, the higher one must win, and someone has to be the one who says so, and that someone is us.
It's a beautiful piece of reasoning, and it's also a bit of a magic trick.
It's both. Now, to be careful, the idea wasn't invented from nothing in 1803. There was English legal tradition, there was argument at the time that courts might do this. Marshall didn't pull it out of thin air, but he's the one who did it, in a real case, and made it stick.
And made it stick is the phrase, because a power the Constitution doesn't spell out only exists as long as everyone keeps agreeing to pretend it does.
Yes, this is the thing that took me forever to get my head round. The court has no enforcement. None. When the court rules, somebody else, the president, the states, the police, has to actually carry it out. The court is a referee who can blow the whistle but can't move the players.
And there's a line, possibly apocryphal. I want to flag that because it gets quoted as gospel and the sourcing is shaky. Attributed to President Andrew Jackson, roughly, the Chief Justice has made his decision, now let him enforce it. Whether he said those exact words, historians genuinely doubt, but the sentiment is the real point. A president who simply ignores the court exposes how little the court holds.
So why doesn't that happen more? Why does everyone keep obeying 9 people with no army?
Habit. Honestly, habit and reputation. 200 years of everyone treating the whistle as real makes the whistle real.
It's legitimacy. The court's only asset is that people believe its rulings are law rather than opinion. The moment enough people stop believing that, the power evaporates, because it was only ever belief holding it up.
Ah, that's slightly terrifying and slightly beautiful.
Can I bring in the bit that surprised me most when I dug into it? For most of the 19th century, the court barely used this enormous power. It struck down a federal law with judicial review in Marbury and then basically didn't do it again for decades.
Wait, decades?
Decades! It sat there loaded, unused, and the next big time it fired the gun, this is the one that should be on every syllabus and somehow isn't, was the Dred Scott case, 1857.
Which is the court at its absolute worst.
The worst! And the court didn't just rule against him, it went enormous. It said black people, free or enslaved, could not be citizens, could never be citizens, and that Congress had no power to ban slavery in the territories. It struck down a major compromise law to do it.
And the idea was to settle the slavery question forever.
That was the ambition. A court stepping in to solve by ruling what the political branches couldn't solve by argument. And it was a catastrophe. It didn't settle anything. Most historians see it as one of the accelerants toward the Civil War. The court reached for its grandest power and used it to make the worst crisis in the country's history worse.
It's the cautionary tale sitting right in the middle of the origin story. This power can build things and it can burn things, and it's the same power either direction.
And it took a war and 3 constitutional amendments to undo what those 9 men did in one ruling.
Which should tell you something about the weight of the thing. A ruling that wrong needed a war to reverse.
Let's slow down on the people, because I think we talk about the court like it's a machine, and it's 9 humans with lunch preferences and grudges.
Oh, the humanity of it is my favourite part. These are people who work in the same building for 30 years, life tenure. They're appointed for life, they leave when they retire or die, so you get these decades-long relationships, rivals who become friends, friends who stop speaking.
And the famous example people reach for is the friendship between 2 justices on opposite ideological poles, Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the left and Antonin Scalia on the right. who really liked each other, went to the opera together, their families spent New Year together by various accounts.
Two people who voted against each other on the biggest questions in the country and then went to hear Puccini side by side.
And I find that moving, because it cuts against the story we tell ourselves, that if you disagree with someone about something that matters, you must hate them. Here are two people who disagreed about almost everything that matters, and clearly didn't.
Though I'd add a note of care. That friendship gets romanticised into a lesson it may not quite carry. It's a nice story. It doesn't mean the disagreements were soft. Scalia's dissents could be scorching. He'd share an opera box with her and then write something about her reasoning that was, let's say, not gentle.
But isn't that the more interesting version? That you can be warm to the person and merciless to the argument?
That is the more interesting version, yes, and it's a distinction the current moment has almost entirely lost.
The other human thing. These appointments are chance. A justice dies at a certain moment, and which president happens to be sitting determines the direction of American law for 30 years. It's not designed, it's the actuarial tables meeting the election calendar.
The lottery of who dies when.
Presidents have been reshaped by the debts they got to fill and the ones they didn't.
There's one confrontation that's worth telling, because it shows the limit of even a very powerful president against this court. The 1930s. Franklin Roosevelt, enormous majorities, the country in the Depression, and the court keeps striking down pieces of his New Deal.
Striking them down one after another, the recovery program gutted from the bench.
And Roosevelt is furious, and he comes up with a plan people remember as court packing. The court had 9 justices, but that number isn't in the Constitution. It's set by Congress, and it's changed over history. So Roosevelt proposes, let me add justices. For every sitting justice over a certain age, I get to appoint a new one. Dress it up as helping the overworked old men.
And that would have let him just outvote the court he didn't like.
Immediately. Appoint enough friendly justices, and the majority flips.
And here's the twist. It fails. His own party won't back it. Even people who loved Roosevelt looked at that and went, no, this is a step too far. You're breaking something.
The independence of the thing.
The independence! And there's a wonderful wrinkle. Around the same time, the court sort of softens, starts upholding the New Deal laws it had been striking down. People called it the switch in time that saved 9.
Which is a lovely phrase, and I have to be the wet blanket. Historians argue about whether the timing was really cause and effect. The switch may have been in motion before the packing plan for reasons of the court's own. The neat story of a court blinking under threat is tidier than the evidence fully supports.
But even the messy version tells you the boundary held. The most powerful president of the century couldn't just remodel the court to taste, and his own side stopped him.
And that's a norm, not a law. Nothing in the text stopped him. The restraint was political and cultural, which means it's exactly as sturdy as people's willingness to honour it.
So when does it become the court we recognise now, the one that's in the middle of every fight?
20th century, and I'd point straight at 1954, Brown against Board of Education. The court rules that racially segregated schools are unconstitutional. Unanimous, 9-0.
And that's the court at its best, the mirror image of Dred Scott.
Same enormous power, striking down laws, telling states what they cannot do, pointed the other direction. And notice, it did what the political branches wouldn't. Congress wasn't going to end segregation, the court did.
And this is the tension that runs through the whole modern story. When the court does a thing you approve of, that the legislature was too cowardly or too gridlocked to do, it feels like heroism. When it does a thing you oppose, the very same manoeuvre feels like 9 unelected people overriding democracy.
And it's the identical power both times.
Identical. The mechanism doesn't change, only whether you like the outcome.
Brown is also where you see the enforcement problem naked. The court says desegregate, and the South largely doesn't. For years. It takes federal troops in places. The whistle blew and the players wouldn't move until someone with actual force made them.
Right, the ruling was 1954 and the actual integration crawled on for a decade plus.
Because the court can declare, it cannot deliver. That gap between declaring and delivering is where all the real drama lives.
And you get to the modern era and the court is just central. Voting, guns, healthcare, marriage, abortion, the biggest social questions all end up in that little marble room, which honestly suggests something's broken upstream in Congress.
Meaning what?
Meaning a healthy system settles the big questions through elected people who can be voted out. When everything important routes through 9 appointed-for-life lawyers instead, it's because the elected branches have stopped functioning. The court fills a vacuum Congress leaves. That's not the court grabbing power so much as power falling into its lap because nobody else will pick it up.
No, I don't buy that, and I think it lets the court off far too easily. Power just fell into its lap. That's the story a powerful institution tells about itself. Nobody put a gun to those justices and made them take the biggest questions in the country. They reach for them.
Hang on, Maya. I don't think that's quite what he said.
It's the effect of what he said. Poor court, forced to rule. Come on.
But that's not the claim. Marcus said the vacuum is real and the court flows into it. Both those things can be true. An institution can be handed a vacuum and choose how greedily to fill it. You're treating them as if they cancel out, and they don't.
Say that again.
Congress abdicating is a real cause. It doesn't erase the court's own appetite. Two things pushing the same direction. You heard it's not the court's fault, and I don't think he said the fault part at all.
I didn't, and I should have been cleaner. I'm not excusing them. I'm saying if you're angry about it, some of that anger belongs upstream at the people who won't legislate. Not all of it, some.
OK, that's fair. I heard a defence of the court and you were describing a system. I came in hot on that, sorry.
No, don't. It's a thing worth being hot about. You're right that it just happened is exactly how power launders itself.
And you're both right, which is the annoying resolution. The vacuum is real and the appetite is real. Blame divides.
Divides. I'll take divides. Let's bring it home. If someone's listening and they take one thing about this court away, what is it?
Mine's the fragility. This enormous power rests on nothing but belief. There's no army behind it, no line in the Constitution spelling it out. It works because generation after generation chose to treat the whistle as real. That's not permanent. It's a habit, and habits can end.
Mine's almost the opposite, and I think they fit together. It's the durability that a country invented more or less by accident in a paperwork dispute in 1803, an institution that could tell the most powerful man in the country no and make it stick without firing a shot. That's an astonishing human achievement. Fragile, yes, but it held for 2 centuries.
And mine, after that little scrap we just had, mine is the thing Oliver landed on with Ginsberg and Scalia. You can be merciless about the argument and warm to the person. A court is 9 people who disagree profoundly and still have to sit in the same room for 30 years and produce something the country will accept as law. That's not a weakness of the design. That might be the whole point of it.
The disagreement is the feature.
As we just demonstrated, badly and then better.
Live tested it for the listeners.
And landed roughly where the court is supposed to. Same room, still talking.
9 people in robes, no army, holding up half a government on nothing but the idea that we all agree to let them. When you say it out loud, it shouldn't work at all.
And yet...
That's where we'll leave it. Thank you both. Truly a pleasure to think this through with people who'd fight me and then feed me the better version.
Any time.
Same room, still talking. That'll do.
This episode was generated with AI by Demades.